Welcome. Because of these trying times, let us remember what Jikahute, our sage, taught us. He said, and yet, since it is fitting that wise men should have knowledge of all events before they come to pass, you must not be left in ignorance of this. There will come a time when it will be seen that in vain have the Comitians honored the deity with heartfelt piety and residual service. All our holy worship will be found bootless and ineffectual, for the gods will return from earth to heaven. Africa will be forsaken, and the land which was once the home of religion will be left desolate, bereft of the presence of the divinities. May you thrive and your soul remain awake forever. One way of having our soul awake forever, and one way of looking at this prophecy and learning from it, is when our ancestors play a critical role in the spiritual life that we are living today, translating into the physical successes that we urge and desire. Is this true? Are our ancestors alive, and are they powerful? Let us ask, do all dead melanin-dominant human beings, Bantus, Africans, become ancestors? Is it an automatic entry? Is it easy? Can it be done? There is more to ancestor reverence. Ancestor veneration, ancestor altar, ancestor worship, because it is very clear and correct that in African traditions, not everyone becomes an ancestor. Let us dive into this. Let us share some information on this and find our way out of the quagmire. We agree that our ancestors are in our blood, and we cannot really discard them or run away from them, but we know that we have got the willpower. We can have our willpower, or we can be deceived to suppress them through practices that lull their consciousness and their spirit and their energy in us. If you call on Jesus, on Muhammad, on Yahweh, you will suppress your ancestors and generate your spiritual energy to those forces that are calling you to do the suppression. So when you say, I don't call on Jesus, I call on my ancestors, the question is, which ones? When you teach us that to speak the name of the dead is to make them live again, which ones? Because if all of them were so powerful, we know that our lives would be easy and comfortable, and answers would be coming instantaneously. Even though in you lives the spirit of an ancient powerful ancestor or ancestors that hold the essential keys to a life of abundance, you can also fail even if you call upon their name to live again. You can also fail even though you speak their name, because they would be a stolen, a sleeping, a lost ancestor or ancestors. They would not be capable of going past the lower fourth dimension dominated by the Chitauris. You must call upon only those ancestors who escaped the religious, technological, spiritual trap set up by the Chitauris, who dwell in the lower fourth dimensions, and they use religions and technology to suppress you and suck your energy in a vampirical system. So not all are ancestors, not all have made it through this channel or through this lock and key method that has been put in place in this density model of consciousness. Millions of our ancestors today perished knowing their enemy, jumped into the oceans, tried to escape from slavery and died in the desert, died of hunger, were eaten by animals, their heads were chopped off, cut off by Muslims, and some were thrown in the oceans by Christians. All these ancestors, many of them perishing today, know or are aware or were aware of their enemy. They knew the rest of their enemy. Question is, why are they not coming back in force and in power to avenge this evil and this war that was occurred, that took place in taking their lives? A lot of our brothers and sisters are perishing in the United States of America today through police brutality and the system's brutality, that runs this whole earth experiments on us by giving us wrong food, giving us poisons, and even spraying a lot of stuff in the atmosphere that we breathe. And yet our ancestors and some of our own brothers and sisters die today knowing this and knowing who the enemy is. And nothing happens to them. There was a great genocide of millions of black, Asian, melanin-dominant human beings, Bantus, in China and in East Asia by the pale mulatto Chinese. But the mulatto Chinese are living a happy life. They are even going over to Africa to dominate and to take over Africa. Why are our ancestors such powerless entities? Or there is more to the story than what meets the eye. Yes, not all are ancestors. There is more to ancestors, and there's more to becoming an ancestor than our declaration, because it is us who make them ancestors. We are the ones that have the capacity and the power to arouse the spirit of millions who perished in the Atlantic and in the Sahara. Nothing can arouse them other than the enemy, the Christian, the Muslim, and the system taking their spirits and suppressing their capacity and ability to awaken. It is like a switch. If you ignore it and you don't switch it on, you cannot blame the lack of electricity, but you can only blame yourself. So Christianity and Islam is suppressing them, and doing so by not apologizing and by not paying reparations. Not the way we want the reparations to be paid. Reparations is life for life and death for death, not money, not anything. So if they keep refusing to accept their guilt, it is us who suffer, because we are not claiming the souls of our ancestors and cleansing them en masse. We can only correct that by reburying them and calling their proper names and asking them and instructing them to fight again against their killers. I know this is deep, but as we keep waking up, we are recalling ancestral customs, remembering tribal symbols, and recognizing the cryptic message of ancient relics. With that said, so shall we begin reminiscing the word and the sounds of our original names, thought to be lost by the hands of our historical enemies, who purposefully and purposely renamed us and renamed practically everything that was ours. Therefore, our ancestors desire and deserve reburial and renaming rights. If done properly, we recreate a huge spiritual army of millions and millions who would avenge their enemies in Islam, Christianity, or even those that sold them amongst our own people. And they will vanquish them and restore our spiritual powers again. Today we hear them coming up with tricks of spiritual bribing, as well as token apologies, so-called reparations. What we want to do is that we want to make our ancestors powerful again, so that when we say, may the ancestors always be with you in truth and in light, we would have done the actions of truth and the light of reburying and renaming them. We can then say, keep calm and call on your ancestors. Which ancestors? Those who have been restored to their ancestorhood through our traditional practices, which our governments are failing to institute, and we are also failing to do. In African spirituality, a dead person becomes a revered ancestor through a process known as ancestralization. Ancestralization is the process by which the living actively work to ensure that a deceased loved one becomes a revered ancestor. Mudzimu. There are so many things we can say about this, but what I have already indicated is adequate, because it indicates that we have failed, and you and me may be calling on ancestors who were Christians, who were Muslims, who were Jews, who were witches, who were evil, or whose burial rights have not been honored, or whose burial system followed European customs, and therefore we are wasting our time by empowering the enemy. The process of ancestralization was also known in Hamit. It was known as the process of becoming an Aku Mudzimu in-laws. The Aku is a spiritual entity that was believed and that is known to be created when a person has died, and the Aku would help the descendants in the afterlife and even during their lives on earth. The process of becoming an Aku was complex and involved a number of rituals and the ceremonies, and one of the rituals was the opening of the mouth, which will mean to give them the ability and capacity and power to live again in the afterlife, to go to judgment, to go through judgment and into the judgment hall. The ceremony was also believed and is also able to reanimate the deceased using their body. No cremation, no fun tricks, but burial into the ground and following the principles of African burial and the rituals. You may think that this is pagan, but this is how Christianity has empowered itself, by suppressing our ancestors and by taking some of them and giving them a title they call saints. The process of ancestralization, known in Africa, practiced by Africans, was thoroughly understood and stolen by Christians. Our ancestors told them and taught them this process. They call these spirit saints. The Catholic Church, which founded Christianity, upon which Christianity is based, through the canonization of the book that was written by the saints called the Bible, main culprit in this process of stealing ancestralization by making saints. You may think that it's not correct or it's far-fetched, but remember, when you read the Bible in the New Testament, it's gospel according to Saint Mark, Saint John, Saint Paul. They are all saints, which means they are all madlos, mdim, spirits, whether they lived or they didn't live, but they've made spirits. You can conjure that. You have the power to conjure a spirit. In Deuteronomy 32:33 in the King James Version, you may think that the Hebrews and the Israelites are not into this game. They are into this game. And he said, the Lord, which is Adonai, the same that was stolen from us, a divinity, not the supreme creator, came from Sinai and rose up from Seir unto them. He shined forth from Mount Paran. This is a deity. It's not the creator. He shined forth from Paran, and he came with 10,000s of saints, the spirits that were put around this Akon, this reptilian, this Chitauri, this divinity. But they come and teach you that your ancestors are devils. Don't do that. They told us that our ancestors added nothing to civilization because they weren't civilized, yet their museums are filled with stolen treasures that they stole from all over Africa and made in the image and likeness of our African ancestors. They've taken our ancestors and they are using them against us. Since not all become ancestors, what do we do then? How can you venerate your ancestors? And do you really need to offer something to your ancestors on their altar, ancestors' altar? You must do a thorough research on how your immediate ancestors lived and how they were buried. An ancestor is any person from whom you are descendant. Your great-grandparents are your ancestors, and their parents are your ancestors too, and their parents as far back as you can go. The formula that you must remember is that calculating the number of your ancestors is simple. As you might expect, the number doubles with every generation. So you must know also the totems of your father and mother separately, and the totems of your grandparents on, great-grandparents on, and whether they lived a life that was Ubuntu Ma'ati. If they didn't live a life of Ubuntu Ma'ati, forsake them. They are not yours. If your ancestor was a Christian, a Hebrew Israelite, a Muslim, a failure in life, do not waste your time with them. They were trapped by the Akons on the fourth dimension because they are the ones that cut you off from your powerful spiritual ancestors in the spirit. How can you connect with them? How can you connect with wise ancestors when you are using those that fought against them, whether as Christians, as Jews, or Muslims? This is proof that you don't need to waste time with such ancestors. But how then do you identify the ones that are awakened? An awakened ancestor or awakened ancestors are believed to have the power to communicate with you, the living. How? Through dreams, visions, and other spiritual experiences. They do not come to you in riddles. They do not give you puzzles to solve or obscure dreams. Those who are doing that are the archons, are the tricksters that you do not need. Your actual ancestors, revered ancestors, are able to intercede on your behalf and are able to help you and protect you from harm and provide guidance, revelation, and the knowledge. When you start to love your ancestors and when you start to search for the correct and true way to honor your ancestors, the bridge between you and those ancestors has been built. The link between you, the living, and the ancestors and the divine spiritual realm has been established. That's the proof. It's not theoretic, it's practical. It can also come through the confirmation via knowing your totems. Because you must recognize yourself in your ancestors. Whether they're stone or golden images, the truth confirmation that you are greater and you were created first is there from what they left. You can see them clearly. So, once a person has been deemed worthy of ancestralization, the living must work to ensure that the deceased person is properly honored and remembered. This may involve performing rituals and ceremonies in honor of the deceased, as well as actively seeking out the guidance and wisdom of the deceased through spiritual practices. If you want to know some of these spiritual practices that are very important, and since all did not become revered ancestors, the biggest question is, do you know how to rediscover which ancestors? If interested, and if you need more esoteric steps, you can contact us on join@marifado.com and we will give you our understanding. Thank you very much. Like our video, share our video, subscribe to our channel, Hamiti Iburu Ethics. Until we meet again, your Manager Topi, Priest Rabbi LM Tumisulu, saying Amen.